Australia's capital soon to become the country's first jurisdiction powered by electric vehicles. The ACT is set to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2035. New being the operative word there, in a bid to reduce carbon emissions, so you can still drive older ones if they're fueled by petrol. Joining us live now is the CEO of the Electric Vehicle Council, Behyad Jafari. Behyad, good morning. So what are your thoughts on the ACT, which wants to mandate all new cars to be electric by 2035?
Good morning. Yeah, look, the ACT doing this is certainly a good start. It's a very achievable target. It's the type of target that you achieve by setting it. It tells the industry and the market that over the next 12 years, this is the direction that we're heading in. Today, some 42% of the global market has a similar ban in place by 2035, so not anything that's catching an industry by surprise, but just saying very clearly, if you're in the business of bringing cars or installing charging stations, you should know that this is the direction that we are headed. So start investing in Canberra today. And certainly, as the rest of the world moves to electric vehicles, don't use Canberra as a dumping ground for your older technology.
Right, yeah, but the problem is that new cars, charging stations, they're all at very low levels still. The infrastructure's not there.
Yeah, and this is exactly how you go about changing that. I think certainly Canberra doing this will provide a big boost to the Canberra region. Nationally, certainly adopting things like fuel efficiency standards finally in Australia. Again, car companies crying out saying adopt these standards, put similar bans in place as exists in the rest of the world. That lets us bring the cars that we already have to your country, and then that lets companies building charging stations invest more in them because it provides them certainty for their investment.
Yeah, Canberra, ACT, very small, much more difficult to do it in other states and territories, right?
Geographically and in terms of the technology, we absolutely know how to cover the country, how to just pepper the country in things like charging stations. Electric vehicle ranges continue to rise. Electric vehicles today having something more like 600 kilometres in range. Electric utes already being made available in countries like New Zealand and the United States. Again, the rapid rise of the technology has been moving at a steady clip. The big shift is that those cars too often aren't making it to Australia and aren't making it into the hands of Australian drivers in the first place. And again, because we see developed countries right around the world have very strict standards in place, they have things like ultimate bans on petrol and diesel in place. That again, for them not being ultimately forcing the market, but saying, much like a shift from analog to digital, this is going to happen, and a ban is finally allowing us to get rid of the final few percent, get rid of the dregs. Putting these plans in place tells an industry what to invest in our market, because the incentives otherwise are perverse. They're to say the petrol and diesel cars that you've already built that no one else will let you sell, come and dump them on our consumers and leave us with higher fuel bills.
Just back to Canberra, it's got even more ambitious targets. It wants 80 to 90% of new light vehicles sold to be net zero emission models. Take-up is still very low, though, because the costs are too high, as what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Can that target be achieved in such a short space of time by 2030?
It certainly can if you take the right steps, and this is, if you should say, there's a new action plan by the ACT government, so there'll be a few more steps announced within it when the report actually comes out. And so again, it's following markets right around the world in the United States, Europe, the UK, who have similar levels of target in place. And that's why these markets are so comfortable with bans, recognising that certainly in the early 2030s, 2032 onwards, they would expect some 95, 99% of new vehicles sold already being electric. And then again, that final ban component being just removing the final holdouts.
Right. So more tax incentives are needed.
Well, the large thing that we need in Australia today is more supply of electric vehicles. And again, coming directly from the car companies, they're saying we actually have cheaper electric vehicles. We already have electric utes. We're selling them around the world hand over fist. But all of those countries have regulations in place that if we don't sell both more fuel efficient electric vehicles, we will be penalised. You don't have those standards in place in Australia, and we do treat you as a dumping ground for older vehicles. So tell us to come and bring you a supply of those vehicles, and you'll see how, as a result, sales will continue to scale.
Because as things stand, you get a $2,000 rebate if you buy a $40,000 electric car. That's particularly in today's climate, that's just going to be too far out of reach for most people.
Yeah, and again, it's recognising none of these are bans that are being brought in place in the next 12 months. Like any new technology, we're seeing that electric vehicle prices are falling. If you think just some 3 or 4 years ago, the cheapest electric vehicle in Australia was a luxury car priced over $100,000. Now we have electric cars with ranges of 400 or 500 kilometres at the $40,000 price range. So that gives you a pretty good understanding of how, just over a few years, how steeply prices are reducing by. And certainly by the end of this decade, we're expecting to see electric cars at price parity with some of the cheapest petrol and diesel cars as well. Again, that big question for us is, will they be sold in Australia or not? And answering that question is entirely up to us.
Okay, Behyad, appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon.